It is finally fight day. I don't know what it was with this week, but it felt a little extra long. But here we are in the midst of UFC 304 about to kick off. I appreciate you guys joining me for the immediate reaction show. And yes, it might sound contradicting with how I started this, but if you are a fan of the show and have been coming back on a weekly basis to watch this, you know that I start this at the beginning of the card and record my immediate reaction for every matchup as it concludes so that I can recap it for you guys real quick and just quickly talk about anything that stands out in my mind with the fight so fresh and finishing just seconds before I hit record on these videos you guys are about to see. So I appreciate all the love and support. I didn't do one last week because the card was too shite for me to give a shit, and shite is coming into play here because this fight taking place in England over there. So shout out to everybody that's there live, considering that this is taking place. I believe the first fight is kicking off at 11 p.m. And they got 14 fights to get through, so they're going to be there till 5, 6 a.m. Going to be absolutely crazy. It will be interesting to see how the crowd reacts throughout the night, who's too drunk, who's too tired. If the crowd decides to stick around for all 14 fights, we'll see how it goes down. But appreciate all the love and support for the show. And yeah, first fight of the night, the one that I care the least about. Let's see how it goes down between Shauna, Bannon, and Elise Ardeline. That was an absolutely atrocious fight to kick off the card, but luckily it only gets better from here. But Shauna Bannon is able to go out there and get a 29-28, 30-27 split decision over Elise Ardeline. Still butchering her name, I apologize, but it doesn't matter because she took the fight on short notice. She came up short, but she made it more competitive than people were expecting it to be, at least based on the odds. But Bannon, again, very sketchy whether she should be in the UFC as of right now. She should be taking these types of fights on the regional scene to sharpen her game enough so that she can be competitive in the UFC. But luckily for her, she's gotten this softball here, right? And obviously we saw her lose her UFC debut against Bruno, and now she barely ekes out a victory over a short notice fighter who probably doesn't even deserve to be in the UFC to begin with. So yeah, very weird fight. I'm glad that I started the card, about 15 minutes late, so I was able to just skip through most of it. You could probably give Bannon the first round because of the submission attempts off of her back, and also Elise wasn't really landing much damage from that top position. And then the third round, I thought it was clear that Bannon was getting the better of the striking, as you could see with Elise's nose getting busted up pretty much that entire time. But very poor fight, not UFC level whatsoever. All right, let's check out the odds that cash. Bannon comes through at -195, by decision +110, and the over 2.5 cash is at -220. Now let's start having some fun. Some good fights are right around the corner now. 13 fights left. Let's see how this heavyweight fight between Mick, Parkin, and Lucas Dreski goes down. Hopefully it's much better than the last one. In his fourth attempt and walk to the UFC cage, Mick Parkin finally gets the finish he's been seeking by knocking out Lucas Dreski in the first round of their matchup. We saw some tepid pace striking from them early, but eventually Parkin was able to pick it up, land a beautiful 1, and then right overhand right that hurt Dreski. He saw that he was wobbled. He followed up with some big shots and got him out of there. For a long time, I've been hyping up Parkin, especially since his Contender Series bout, where he came in as a big underdog against an LFA Brazilian heavyweight, but he managed to go out there, finish him in the first round, and then since then has continued this undefeated run. He had 3 straight decisions, most recently over Mohamed, but then goes out there and gets that much needed finish to put him possibly up against a ranked opponent in his next matchup. This guy is really good. He's very intelligent with his striking. I wish we would see a little bit more of his grappling, but if his striking continues to look like this, he might not need the grappling, but I think his grappling is still a wrinkle in his game that not a lot of people are looking at, and I think that's actually going to pay off for him as he continues to take steps up in the UFC's heavyweight division. But it was a beautiful performance from him here to get that knockout over the Pole, Lucas Dreski. All right, let's check out the odds that cash your Parkin. Heavy chalk here coming through at -460, wins by knockout at +340, round 1 +500. Round 1 knockout +850, and then the under 1.5. You don't often see this type of plus money on a heavyweight under 1.5, but it comes through at +235. Amazing performance there from Mick Parkin to get that win, to get Lucas Dreski out of there. I can't wait to see who they match him up next, but it better be somebody with a number beside their name. And what could go down as the easiest fight to predict in terms of exact method of victory and round, Sam Patterson goes out there and proves a lot of people right, submitting Kiefer Crosby in the first round with the arm triangle choke that he was able to set up beautifully and eventually get the tap. There were some sweaty moments in terms of when Crosby actually landed some big shots, but I think that's always going to be the case when you're talking about a guy with Sam Patterson and seeing how out cold he was when he went up against Yanal Ashmus last year. But if he can continue to showcase to people that he can take some big shots and not have his, not be completely out of it or not get completely knocked out, then people will be able to build a little bit more confidence in terms of his durability. But everybody and their mother was pretty much on the round one submission here. This was one of my 3 best prop bets that I dropped for you guys as well, and we saw it come to fruition as Patterson mixed it up on the feet a little bit, eventually got the clinch position he needed, got the takedown right into full mount, and started working for that arm triangle immediately. Great work in terms of his BJJ black belt knowledge to know that he didn't have the arm triangle choke initially, gets back into full mount, and then gets that position that he needs just a little bit tighter, and then goes off out into side control and getting the choke the way that he did. Absolutely phenomenal performance there from the heavy favorite, Sam Patterson. All right, let's check out the odds that cash for this matchup. Sam Patterson, just like Mick, Parkin, cashes as a minus 460 favorite. Comes through by submission at minus 135. Round 1 plus 105. Round 1 submission plus 170. And the under 1.5 cashes at minus 180. Great work from Sam Patterson. I love that he's slowly starting to distance himself from that unfortunate knockout that he suffered last year. He is a pretty solid prospect to keep an eye on. Let's see how the UFC decides to match him up moving forward and if he can get another fight in before the end of the year. There were a couple shaky moments from Modestas Bukauskas, but eventually he gets the arm triangle choke victory over Marcin Prachnio. It was a war, but it was Bukauskas' grappling that bailed him out of some bad spots and then eventually getting that arm triangle choke. Even from the wrong position, he had it on the opposite side of where he had his half guard, which is usually a no-no, but considering Prachnio pretty much emptied his gas tank at the beginning of that third round with that big flurry of punches, he landed some big shots and maybe lesser men would have gone down, but Bukauskas was able to keep his wits about him, eventually get the takedown, and then work for that position to lock up that choke and get the tap. Great work from Bukauskas to implement his jiu-jitsu, and as you guys will see from the odds, not really a spot that a lot of people expected him to have success, but he still goes out there and showcases that he is a full and complete mixed martial artist, normally a striker, but showcasing that he can get himself out of trouble by leaning on his grappling if that's what he needs to do. All right, let's check out the odds that cash here. Bukauskas comes through at minus 155 by submission, plus 1,700, round 3 plus 1,300, round 3 submission plus 5,000, and the over 2.5 cashes at minus 170. Again, great work from Bukauskas. Prachnio wasn't looking too bad, was doing pretty well with the blitzing attacks that he had, ending most of those combinations off with leg kicks, but unfortunately throwing a little bit too wild and too reckless, causing him to slow down and eventually giving up that submission. Unfortunate for him, but good work for Bukauskas. And like Daniel Cormier said in the interview there, has won 3 of his last 4 fights. Maybe somebody to keep an eye on in the light heavyweight division. The first underdog of the night comes through with Obon Elliot showcasing very solid defensive grappling, shutting down the wrestling game of Preston Parsons and cashing as the underdog by unanimous decision. On the feet, obviously, Elliot was pretty smooth with the slick 1-2 down the pipe. I felt if Parsons actually threw a little bit more, he probably could have been a little bit more competitive after realizing that his wrestling was not going to work out. But shout out to Elliot for making the improvements in his game to get him to this level and actually pull off this victory over a guy in Parsons who I thought was pretty much a shoe-in to win this matchup. I was pretty high on Parsons in this spot and came up eating crow here with Elliot. Once again, messing up my play. I was heavily against him against Brito on the Contender Series. Brito nearly finished him, but ended up gassing himself out and then getting on the losing end there. Then obviously Elliot gets the win over Woodburn. I wouldn't dare fade him with a guy like Woodburn. But here against Parsons, I really thought Parsons had what it took to eventually get him to the ground. The first round kind of went how I expected it to be competitive. Both guys having success in the grappling and the striking realm. But then in the second and third rounds, that's where I really thought Parsons was going to start to take over with his wrestling. But shout out to Elliot in terms of getting his takedown defense sharp enough to get to the point that he could actually get the win the way that he did here. I'm starting to have some reservations in terms of picking guys that are flying overseas and trying to get wins in enemy territory. A couple months back, I had a small play on Roberto Hernandez on Cage Warriors as he went up against the guy in Liam Gittins in a fight that I thought he should have won pretty easily, but he seemed to gas out after the first or second round, and that was a guy that normally showcases a solid 3-round pace, showcasing his striking and even grappling if he needed to, but for some reason he gassed out pretty quickly against Gittins. And here against Parsons, I'm not saying Parsons gassed out, but I expected to see a little bit more pressure from him, a little bit more output in terms of the striking, even especially when his grappling wasn't working out for him. So regardless, I got to tip my hat to Obon Elliot for going out there and making the improvements that he needed. The kid's probably better than I was giving him credit for. He's definitely getting better as well, being, just over 25, 26 years old as well. This is a guy that is clearly in a stage of his career that he can make these types of improvements and defeat guys like Parsons, who, again, I thought was a pretty solid spot for this weekend, but it did not end up being that way. All right, let's check out the odds that cash here. Elliot comes through as the first underdog of the night at plus 140, by decision plus 350, and the over 2.5 hits at minus 140. Again, great work from Obon Elliot here. Parsons has to go back to the drawing board to try to get back in the win column, but Elliot is streaking now. Let's see if he can keep it going. This highly anticipated flyweight grudge match between Manel Capp and Mohamed Makhachev ends up going to the scorecards, and it was a tepid-paced fight through the first 2 rounds. In the third round, we got a little bit more action, but ultimately it is Mohamed Makhachev who ends up getting his hand raised over Manel Capp by, I believe it was 130-27 and 229-28. I thought the first round Manel Capp won. I thought the second round could have gone either way. I guess you could lean the Makhachev way, and then the third round, I just felt like we did not see enough from Capp to warrant actually having that round scored in his favor. Very unfortunate. I believe it was the second round, beginning of the second round, we saw maybe even the first round actually that we saw Capp hurt his foot. It seemed like he dislocated his big toe or something like that, or his index toe, and that seemed to compromise a lot of the power that he was able to generate, as well as the footwork that he was able to showcase, which is, a big part of his game that fuels his game so that he can get off on that power as well. But decent enough grappling defense for him, but it was a very slow-paced fight. I think Capp was more so worried about the takedowns that were coming his way, which made him a little bit more hesitant in terms of throwing his strikes. And then obviously Makhachev waiting for the opportunity to shoot, but also trying to evade the big strikes that were inevitably going to be coming back his way from Manel Capp. So a good win for Makhachev here. Probably sets himself up for a title shot. Let's actually talk about the odds that cash first before we talk about what's next. Makhachev moneyline comes through at minus 185. A lot of steam on him on fight day to push him up to a near 2-1 favorite. By decision plus 130 comes through, and then the over 2.5 comes through at minus 195. Again, good work from Makhachev here. And given the circumstances of the flyweight division, this probably seems like a number 1 contender spot. I want to quickly pull up the rankings here to affirm that, because I believe Makhachev came in as the number 6th ranked flyweight. So the only guys ahead of him, Tatsuro Taira, who obviously had that weird injury win over Alex Perez about a month or so back. You got Kai Car-France taking on former title challenger Steve Erceg next month. You got Amir Albazi sitting on the sidelines. Brandon Moreno wanting to take some time off. Brandon Royval, I believe, just came up short in his own... I believe, Brandon Royval actually defeated Brandon Moreno last time around. I feel like Brandon Royval fought again after that. Let me just quickly refresh my memory here. Yeah, so he got his title fight against Pantoja in December, came back and fought in February against Moreno, won that fight by split decision. But again, I think that Makhachev may have earned himself this title shot. Maybe we get Royval versus Tyra as the next number one contender. Obviously, Steve Erceg is still up there. Maybe the winner of Erceg and Car France faces Amir Albazi. But I think Makhachev could end up being the next guy in line for the title shot. So would be interesting to see how that one fares. And then Manel Capp, very unfortunate. Again, he's had a little bit of road bumps. This injury in the fight probably doesn't help his case, but I think he could quickly bounce back into the top five once he heals himself up, and hopefully he can get back into the cage and not too long. But regardless, this night belongs to Mohamed Makhachev as he gets the unanimous decision win over Manel Capp. Very crisp performance there from Jake Hadley as he goes out there and springs the upset against Colin Loughran. Keiron, I heard them just talk about it or say his name for 15 minutes and still messed it up. Loughran, I believe, is how at least you say the last name, so I'll be sure to get that right here during this segment. But great work from Hadley. You know, I was one of the few guys to actually predict him to win this fight. Didn't actually end up getting to the betting window to actually play him. You know, there was a lot of action coming in on Loughran on fight day that got him out to about plus 200 on a certain couple of fights or a couple of spots, but still a little bit too late to get in on that. But I expected the pressure and striking advantage of Hadley to prevail here. You know, I knew his takedown defense was going to be good enough, but I thought it far exceeded my expectations of how good it was going to be here. And then in the striking realm, Loughran showed some good striking against Angel Pacheco, but you notice that he's getting busted up in that fight as well because he has an issue in terms of moving his head and his striking defense, which I believe Hadley had an advantage in because of the speed and the straight shots down the pipe, not to mention the reach advantage that he was enjoying as well. So good win for Jake Hadley there, showcasing that he's still worthy of being on the UFC roster and avoiding a 3-fight losing streak here. And I wouldn't mind seeing him at 135 pounds. He has the frame for it, and he could be successful at this, especially not having to deplete himself and get down to 125 pounds. If he shows that type of striking and that type of takedown defense, this guy's going to be difficult to deal with in the 135-pound division. All right, check out the odds that cash here. Hadley cashes as the underdog at plus 185, by decision at plus 380, and the over 2.5 hits at minus 240. Again, great work here from Hadley. A lot of things that Loughran has to round out and sharpen up. Obviously, his strength was a big asset for him on the regional scene, but that's not going to cut it in the UFC when you have guys that are technically better everywhere else. So we'll see how he's able to bounce back, but it will be interesting to see how Hadley decides to move forward and if he decides to stay at 135 pounds. Here I am kicking myself once again for not looking to fade Molly McCann with a very big underdog. I failed to do it against Yulia Stoliarenko, and I failed to do it once again here as Bruno Brasil goes out there and gets a unanimous decision victory over Meatball Molly McCann. And I think it's more so to do with the fact that Bruno Brasil has kind of let me down too much in the past. And one thing I think I overlooked going into this matchup is her teaming up with the Fighting Nerds. And they've done a great job in terms of implementing a solid style for her, especially early in fights, getting her to throw a little bit more, targeting the body of her opponents, utilizing the calf kick. And it seemed like she was starting to slow down a little bit in that third round, but she was already so far ahead in that first two rounds that it didn't end up mattering anyway. But again, I'm so pissed that I did not take this opportunity to, again, a fighter in Bruno Brasil who I've, again, backed in the past and kind of been a little bit higher on than most people. I think it's because I was so high on her in the past and she's let me down so many times that I was skeptical in terms of actually taking this shot on her and just ended up predicting Molly McCann, but just passing this fight all around. But Brasil, great work, great calf kick, great body kick, hurting McCann numerous times. Again, still underperforming in the fact that she probably should have gotten that finish. She should have gone a little bit more crazier with the smelling the blood in the water and looking to get McCann out of there. She hurt her on 3 separate occasions in that first 5 minutes, but was still unable to finish the job. Luckily, she's still able to conserve her energy well enough to go out there and win the next 2 rounds. And I believe it was 230-27s and 129-28. Great work from Bruno Brasil, causing the Manchester crowd to go silent as Molly McCann ends up taking a loss here. So let's check out the odds that cash. Brasil, big underdog, comes through at plus 280. That's back-to-back solid underdogs. By decision, plus 490, and the over 2.5 cashes at minus 155. Been a solid night for some of the underdogs after a sweep from the favorites, I believe, through the first 4 or 5 fights. Let's see how Nathaniel Wood does as a big favorite and if he's able to get the job done here against Daniel Pineda. As someone who had the under 2.5 and the fight does not go to decision, that was probably one of the most nerve-wracking fights of the night, with Nathaniel Wood hurting Daniel Pineda numerous times in rounds 1 and 2, but unable to close the show due to poor fight IQ and following Pineda to the ground, where Pineda is able to wrap him up and have some decent success of his own. But ultimately, it is Wood who is able to cruise to a decision victory after Pineda had some solid success in the third round, holding him down. But I don't know if Wood ran out of gas or I just don't know what it was, but Wood still ends up getting the unanimous decision victory here. Good win for him. Questionable decision making, but he still ends up getting the job done here. All right, let's check out the odds that cash. Wood moneyline comes through at -420 as another big favorite cashes on the card. By decision +250, and the over 1.5 cashes at -165. Great work from Nathaniel Work, but again, wish he would have gotten the finish for us. But that leads us right into the main card, where we have Arnold Allen taking on Giga Chikadze to kick things off. Let's see how it goes down. It seemed to start off a little slow for Arnold Allen, but he picks up the momentum in the second and third rounds as Chikadze starts to slow down, and that's where Allen is able to get the better of Chikadze, busting up the nose and landing some big shots, but eventually going on to win a unanimous decision against Chikadze and get back on the winning track. He was on a 2-fight losing streak going into this matchup, and he was able to snap that losing streak with a solid Arnold Allen-esque type performance. Again, I'm not the biggest on him because of that tepid pace striking approach that he takes early, but that constant footwork and forward movement, pressure, staying in his opponent's face, and then just landing those shots repeatedly, even if they don't come that often, he's landing with heat, and then he starts to pick up the pace later on in fights. That's where he starts to pull away from some of these guys, and Chikadze was unable to keep up with that style. So good win from Allen here. Let's talk about the odds I cashed first, then we'll talk about what he called out. Allen moneyline comes through at -240, by decision +115, and the over 2.5 cashes at -215. Again, great work from Allen to establish his range and really stick with that pressure. In terms of who he called out, he calls out Yair Rodriguez, calls out Brian Ortega. Obviously, Ortega just got matched up with Diego Lopez for the Noche UFC card. And in terms of Yair Rodriguez, I wouldn't mind seeing that fight. That's 2 top featherweights going at it. Possibly good work for both guys to try to get into the title talks once again. Hopefully, they're able to put that fight together. All right, the following fight was Gregory Rodriguez grinding out a decision victory over Christian Leroy Duncan. There was a lot of blood in this matchup. Both guys cutting each other up. Elbows landed from both guys. But ultimately, it was the grappling of Rodriguez that allowed him to get ahead on Christian Leroy Duncan. I was thinking more so that we would see Duncan utilize his speed and power a little bit more effectively, but Rodriguez did not allow him to really get off much at space. Rodriguez's power was actually dictating the pace as well, which eventually led to the takedowns and the grinding approach. But it was phenomenal work there from the veteran Rodriguez to grind that victory out. It was a hard-fought win, but he was able to get his hand raised here by decision. All right, check out the odds that cash. Rodriguez moneyline comes through at +110, by decision +500, and the over 1.5 cashes at -150. Again, great work from Rodriguez, who's always bubbling around the contendership in the middleweight division, but always ends up hitting a little bit of a roadblock. We'll see if he can take this momentum and parlay it into a little bit more success and start getting closer to that title contention that a lot of people believe he should be in and near. But great work from him here as he is victorious over Christian Leroy Duncan. Paddy Pimblett does it once again after a very questionable takedown from Bobby Green. He finds himself in a guillotine and then triangle choke from Paddy Pimblett, and he is rendered unconscious. Shout out to credit to Paddy Pimblett, I should say, for being aware when he was in that grappling position to ensure that he was able to get the leg over the shoulder of Bobby Green and gave up on the guillotine just to lock in the triangle. But again, very questionable decision making from Bobby Green. I don't know if the calf kicks were starting to catch up to him and that goaded him into taking a shot against Paddy, but a lot of people expected, myself included, that if Bobby kept this fight in the striking range, that's where he would be able to have success. But it seemed like he had a little bit of issues in terms of getting started, and that's where Paddy Pimblett was able to take over with that submission attempt and then force Bobby Green to go to sleep. I'm still mystified. I mean, Pimblett keeps squeaking out these weird wins. Well, not a lot of them are weird. Obviously, the Jared Gordon one is still very criticized in terms of being a controversial decision. And then this one with Bobby Green shooting doesn't make any sense. But that's kind of the way my night has been going with some of the ways that some of these fights have been playing out. So good win for Paddy Pimblett there. Let's check out the odds that cash. Pimblett comes through at -105 by submission at +480. Round 1 +550. Round 1 submission +1,000. And the under 2.5 hits at +125. Again, great work from Paddy Pimblett here. Calls out Renato Moicano, who actually has a September date against Benoit Saint Denis. And if I'm not mistaken, that is the main event of the UFC Paris card. If Moicano gets past BSD, that could be a pretty big contendership fight if he ends up lining himself up with Pimblett, or at least getting close to that contendership. Even for losing, if Moicano ends up losing, I would still love to see Pimblett versus Moicano and see how that fight ends up transpiring. But regardless, this night belongs to Paddy Pimblett, submitting and rendering Bobby King Green unconscious in the first round. Early in the podcast, I was talking about how Sam Patterson round 1 submission was probably one, if not the second, easiest method of victory and prediction of the night. This was the other one I was talking about, as Tom Aspinall goes out there and knocks out Curtis Blaydes in 1 minute. It was a tepid start, both guys having some success of their own, but until Tommy Aspinall landed that beautiful jab to put Curtis Blaydes on his ass, he followed up with some big shots, and I'm not sure if we saw Curtis Blaydes protesting the stoppage. I think it was more so just surprised that, like, fuck, I can't believe this happened again. Like, he always finds himself in these bad positions, strikes a little bit longer than he should, and let's give him credit. He was throwing some good shots down the pipe. A couple of them actually hit Aspinall, so maybe he was gaining some confidence from that, but we saw that once the power actually came into play, it was obvious that Tom Aspinall was going to be able to put out Curtis Blaydes, and he didn't put him out, but he put him away, getting that first round victory and defending his interim championship after winning it back in November over Sergey Pavlovich. Phenomenal performance here from Tom Aspinall. Again, it's going to take a guy like John Jones to push Aspinall to fight into deeper rounds and see if he can actually come out on top. Will we get that fight next? Obviously, we know Jones is going to fight Stipe probably by the ending of the year, but it would be nice to see John Jones stick around and possibly fight Aspinall. Before I continue to talk about that, let's talk about the odds that cash here. Tom Aspinall moneyline comes to at -390 by knockout, -150. Round 1, -105. Round 1 knockout, +150. And the under 1.5 cash is at -170. I feel bad for anybody that was seeking the value here on Curtis Blaydes. We just know that he will often come up short against the power punchers of the division. And when you mix the athleticism, power, and speed of Aspinall, this was not going to be a good night for Blaydes, and that's what ended up happening here. And like I said, he called out John Jones afterwards. That's the only opponent next for him. I get it. The UFC wants to do the legacy fight between Jones and Stipe. We haven't seen Stipe in a long time now. Obviously, Jones, it's going to be almost a year and a half, closer to 2 years by the time he steps in the cage in November. I get it. Legacy fight. Let's get that over with ASAP. But John Jones, a guy, a special talent. Obviously, he wants to try to end his career undefeated, minus that, obviously, Matt Hamill loss that he has on his record. But it would be great to see him try to go out there and try to defeat another generation of fighters here. And the best guy out there right now, the best heavyweight on the planet, is Tom Aspinall. Let's see if John Jones can do something about that if he decides to stick around after if he defeats Stipe Miocic. But good work here from Tommy Aspinall, getting the win. First round, first minute over Curtis Blaydes to defend that interim heavyweight title. Main event time up next. Shout out to all those folks in Manchester. It is currently 5:20 a.m. Let's see if they're able to survive the main event. Belal Mohamed goes out there and picks up the unanimous decision victory, defeating Leon Edwards and becoming the new undisputed welterweight champion, cashing as an underdog, but also going out there and shutting up the haters by implementing a grapple-heavy approach and coming out victorious. Very interesting to see him take that approach and still be successful, especially considering when you have more credentialed wrestlers like Kamaru Usman and Colby Covington who were unable to do that to Leon Edwards, although Usman did have success in the first fight doing such things, and maybe we just didn't get the version of Usman we were expecting last time around. But Great work from Mohamed, staying busy with the hands and then shooting very powerful takedowns or entering and level changing very quickly, very explosively, getting his hands tied and immediately putting Leon Edwards up in the air and dropping him on his back or on his head, as we saw in the second round. But great work from Mohamed. I believe the third and fifth round is what you could give to Leon Edwards, especially after he landed that devastating elbow to finish off the fight. But luckily, Mohamed was able to hold on and then still get his hand raised on the scorecards. 248-47s, 149-46, but great performance from Mohamed, showcasing he is one of the best, if not the best welterweight on the planet, given the pace, cardio, and just overall game planning that he brings to the table. Phenomenal performance from Mohamed there. Again, that third round, obviously he didn't win that round, but he did a good job in terms of utilizing his submission defense and staying safe enough to not get submitted. All right, let's check out the odds that cash here. Mohamed plus 225 comes through as the underdog by decision plus 340, and the over 4.5 hits at minus 215. The spot that I was on here, even though I predicted against Mohamed, I ended up going with the Mohamed plus 5.5 point spread, and that comes through with relative ease here. Very happy with that. It was only minus 105, spectacular line there, but I'm glad that he ended up winning outright as well. Very unfortunate performance there from Leon Edwards. Let's quickly check the UFC rankings so we can see who could potentially be next for Belal Muhammad, because it's just been in such a weird transition period after Leon Edwards defeated Kamaru Usman. Usman had pretty much cleaned out the welterweight division, and then Leon Edwards' win, he goes out there and defeats the two prior champions, although Colby Covington was an interim champion. For some reason, my the UFC rankings is not loading here. Here, let's see if we can do this. Actually, here we go. All right, welterweights. Let's quickly check that. So, Belal Muhammad is now the champion. I guess Leon Edwards gets pushed down to 1. Kamaru Usman is number 2. I doubt he gets a shot. Shavkat Rakhmonov is number 3, and I know that Jack Della Maddalena has been kind of pointing at a fight there. I don't know if they would give Shavkat the title shot off rip there, but Maddalena versus Rakhmonov should definitely be the next number 1 contender. Ian Machado Gary is definitely still up there. He's saying he wants, I don't know who he called out, but he definitely called out somebody afterwards. So yeah, I think probably the winner of Shavkat and Maddalena. I know they haven't made that fight yet, but I would definitely love to see them go at it. Leon Edwards, maybe him going up against the winner of Gilbert Burns and Sean Brady. So there's a lot to do over at the top of the welterweight division. No clear number 1 contender, especially with the UFC likely giving Shavkat another fight before he fights for a title. But at least Belal Muhammad gets his hand raised here and gets the dub. All right, let's put a bow on the show here. It is 1:30 a.m. Eastern time right now, which means it is 6:30 local time where the fights take place. So shout out to all those guys probably falling asleep on their way home. But yeah, let's put a recap on this, or a cap on this. There was 2 knockouts, 3 submissions, 9 decisions. Not what you would want to see for a 14-fight card that's going overnight local time. Favorites ended up going 8-5, and my performer of the night, great performance from Belal Muhammad. But I want to go back to the prelims and shed some more light on Jake Hadley, who had a phenomenal striking performance against Colin Lochrain, again, butchering his name once again. Lochran, I guess you can call him, but back against the wall for Hadley, coming in as a near plus 200 underdog, up a weight class on short notice, putting on a striking display, very solid performance, and getting that win there. Again, there were other guys that had great performances, but in terms of the course of 15 minutes, I thought we saw great work from Hadley, from his spectacular takedown defense to his to his crisp striking. I thought he was deserving of the performer of the night. Shout out to Mick Parkin, runner-up as well. Arnold Allen looking good as well, but I really think performer of the night overall should go to Jake Hadley there. All right, that's a wrap on the UFC 304 immediate reaction show. Appreciate all the love and support. I will be back on Monday to break down UFC Abu Dhabi for you guys, headlined by Corey Sandhagen and Umar Nurmagomedov. hopefully I'm able to have a much better performance there than I had on UFC 304. See you guys Monday. Peace.